Welcome to Crypto and Gaming, where we speak about tomorrow's games today. Brought to you in part by OneUpGaming.io, the metaverse of tomorrow today. Also brought to you by the Finding Genius podcast, discussing medicine, health, and bioscience on iTunes, Spotify, and all your other favorite places to download podcasts onto your favorite device. Hi, this is Josh Hale, and this is the Crypto and Gaming Podcast. I'm here today with Timothy Gerrtisen, who is a gentleman who has been working in the video game space for a long time. He is currently working with Lost Boys Interactive as their COO, and he is still active in the gaming space and everything from video games to, I believe, some current board game stuff. And so what we're going to be talking about is the future of video games and what we both see as the possibilities that can be presented today and what we can expect to see tomorrow, 5-10 years down the road, based on both current technology and based off of the imagination of cool guys like Tim. So Tim, can you tell the audience a little bit about your background so I don't have to, give a report card?
My name is Timothy Gerrtisen. As you mentioned, I'm currently the COO of Lost Boys Interactive, which is based out of Madison, Wisconsin, but is all over the country now, as we are a remote-first studio. I've been in the games industry since, professionally, I published my own RPG way back in the day. I think it was 1990 when I first published it, called Sphere, which was a science fiction role-playing game. But I really made that as sort of a way to get into the games industry. And it was funny, at that time, I really wanted to get into pen and paper games. And I started applying to video game companies because I was also a video gamer, mainly at the time, Amiga. Amiga was sort of my jam back then. I wanted to break in the games industry. And at that time, the tabletop industry was tanking. It was nothing like it is now. And everyone I went to was like, yeah, you don't want to get into the board and tabletop industry right now because it's just falling apart. I got into video games. My first job was as a lead designer on A10 Tank Killer 2 for Dynamics back in 92. I worked for Sega of America. I was the co-founder of Human Head Studios. I worked for American Laser Games and Her Interactive. I was studio director for Irrational Games at the very, very, very tail end of BioShock and during BioShock Infinite. And I was also the studio director for Fantasy Flight Interactive, which was the digital arm of Fantasy Flight Games. Under Asmodee. So I've been all over the industry. I've worked on tons and tons of games over the years. A10 Tank Killer, Aces of the Deep. I worked for FASA, the interactive side. I worked on MechWarrior 3 and what became MechWarrior 4 and the Battletech pods, if you've ever seen or played those. I was the lead producer on those for a few years. So I was one of the people behind the original Rune and the original Prey and a whole bunch of other games over the years. So I've been in video games, I've been in board games, I've published both over the years, and it's just been an amazing ride. Next year will be my 30th year in the video games.
So I'm not, as such an illustrious career as you. I've been in the game space for about 10 years. As I told you when we were emailing back and forth, I'm an attorney, and I've done a lot of interesting things as an attorney, but only came into the gaming space, about 10 years ago. And, I started in tabletop. Unlike you, tabletop had just started, a symphony of interesting things at that time. And what I saw was this really interesting thing that was growing. And then I saw like people were kind of combining the idea of tabletop and digital. And so we formed a company called Unbox Games, and we've been making digital renditions of board games. That's specifically what the mandate of that company is. And, it's an interesting process to, go from tabletop stuff to digital and then to translate it back the opposite way, because a lot of times we have designers in one place that says, oh man, I have a great idea for this tabletop thing based off of this digital game I did. So now we're, going backwards from our original intent as well. And I'm sure you've seen the same thing over years and years. Oh, yeah. Ideas are really, they pass back and forth, and different ways than you would expect, particularly if you're open to listening to them. Right now, we have seen in the past couple years like the tremendous growth of different cryptocurrencies and different ideas within the cryptocurrency space for everything from, everybody's talking about Bitcoin and Ethereum and, how horrible it is to do anything on Ethereum because it's so expensive to do. And now you have all these other ways to do things. And one of the things that has happened in the past year to 2 years is this idea of an NFT. And NFTs allow us to do a lot of things apart from, like simple profile images. And I'm curious, what if you've done any research into that for video games for your company, or if you've had any thoughts on it one way or another, because it's something we're doing full time now.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, without going into any confidential information, NFTs is going to be a major part of the industry moving forward. I think I've seen I worked for FASA years ago, and I've seen people selling old FASA artwork as NFTs now. I think NFTs allow some really interesting areas. You're starting to see consumer-based content in
Hmm.
games, and I think there's an opportunity, especially there. So you have a lot of games now where somebody will create a Steam workshop and they'll make this thing for that game. So Rust would
Right.
be an example. If you ever played the Rust game, they have a huge Steam workshop where people can create and trade items. And I think NFT, that is a form of NFT, and you're going to see a lot more growth, I think, in that area where people can make games, kind of add their own imprint on games
Hmm.
within limitations. Obviously, those sort of Steam Workshop setups are curated, so the
Right.
curation is a factor that with NFTs is a little more complicated. Because you can't, especially if I'm a licensed title. Rust is something that's kind of the Wild West. But if let's say you create consumer generated content for something like Star Wars, they're not going to allow certain things to be officially represented in a Star Wars game. If it goes against whatever is against their branding. So I think NFTs with non-branded games opens up an interesting world of opportunities, and people can create things of value for the things they love. So the super fans and the people who are really into things and want to do interesting things with their games. But then you're seeing a lot of pushback at the same time, like Games Workshop most recently, who seems to be clamping down on a lot of consumer generated content. So I think the companies that sort of are able to navigate this water and reach an accord with their audiences are going to be able to create some really interesting opportunities for NFTs, because if it's done right, everybody can make money there.
Right. Everybody wins. I find it curious that you're talking about Games Workshop in particular. Not that I have any opinion on what they're doing specifically, more the idea of seems very reminiscent to me of Napster and the Pirate Bay, which happened, for a lot of people, that are, the 20-year-olds today, they never downloaded anything on Napster.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
Napster was a cutting edge thing that allowed you to download basically any song that you wanted to. And of course, you had the recording artists, the RIA, I think it's called, that was pushing back against that very, very hard. And ultimately, they killed Napster, but that led to Pirate Bay, and Pirate Bay just did it better and it did it faster. And now all of a sudden, you had artists that were not making money off those downloads, and I'm seeing something very similar in NFTs, something that is going to be very interesting in the next 5 to 10 years. Of you have this pushback from companies like Game Workshop, and the world's going to continue moving on with or without those companies, I think. And I think that's exactly
No,
what
exactly.
happened previously with MP3s and, well, even movies and stuff. You could download anything at that time. I haven't been on,
Well,
a torrent for years. I just watch Netflix, but it's a similar thing, I think, don't you?
Well, I was going to say exactly that. I think Napster is a great example. The thing is there are opportunities created. Everyone fears the immediate implications, but the
Hmm.
savvy person is looking at what are the business opportunities.
Right.
Because when Napster came out, Netflix even a thing?
No, it was
Was the
not. Not
disc
when
based
Napster came
version?
out.
Because yeah, I mean there was the disc based version of Netflix that it sort of
Oh God,
was
I
the
forgot about
only
that.
Netflix for
Actually, I
a
think you
long
can still
time. Yeah,
do that.
you still can. It costs a little more, And I think did they split it into a separate company?
I
I know
don't
that was
know.
the plan for a while. No
I'm
one, I
sure
mean,
there's
I
all
don't know
three
anyone who
people
does it
doing it.
anymore, but I remember at the time everybody was doing it, right? They were getting the little
Right,
discs. You'd watch it, you throw it back in the envelope, you stick it back in the mail. Everybody was doing that. You got like what, 3 a month or whatever it was. And I mean, they made it work sort of in a low tech kind of way.
right,
But at the time was a massively interesting and new idea. But then they went digital, and that changed the whole world of how we looked at streaming. And you're seeing this, there's this constant ebb and flow. I mean, you look at now where Netflix, like you said, I could go out on a BitTorrent and download a bunch of content and watch it, but
right.
it's a lot easier to just go on Netflix and go
Press
search for
play.
this, or go
Right,
on, like anyone with Amazon who has Prime gets Amazon Prime Video. Go on, so now you have two services. One is kind of free. You pay 129 a month for Prime, but mainly you're getting it for all the other stuff, and then they hand you the video. I don't know how long that's going to last, but where I see now is you get that someone comes up with a smart idea and goes, "Oh, that's how you make money." So music, there was a
hmm,
reaction to Napster. I think was the Apple iTunes. Like,
right.
oh, I'll just because at the time I think what were CDs, like $16, $15
Yeah, so they
per
started selling
CD.
at 99 cents a song or something at the time.
Like, yeah, you can get a song for $1. Brilliant. And an album was $10. So it's even cheaper. And, it just completely obliterated it. And then you had Napster. People started grousing about Napster, but then you had these other things like Pandora and other, music services where I can just listen to the tunes I want to listen to when I want to listen to. Suddenly there were people are thinking about it like businessmen and not just out of fear. And the same thing with NFT,
Right,
you're seeing a fear reaction. I think you're seeing there's always a fear reaction from the sort of larger state companies who haven't thought about the future yet, and then somebody comes along, disrupts it, and says, no, this is how you make,
right,
and they figure it out, and then they roll forward. Then you get the problem of those central users get so good, those gatekeepers of content. Like Netflix was the only game in town, what, 4 years ago. Now you got
right,
Amazon Prime, you got Disney, Hulu, you got everybody starting a new network, CBS, Paramount. And, suddenly I used to be able to go to Netflix for all my content. Now it's like, oh crap, I got to go to this group. I got to go to this group. I got to
hmm,
go to this group. And then it all falls apart again because everybody got greedy. They're like, oh, I'm making money off of Netflix, but I make a lot more money if I did my own channel.
right.
And then it all falls apart. And then someone else, it's this constant cycle. And I think NFTs right now are kind of in that early phase where there's a lot of fear going on. And how do I react to that? And I don't think we've seen that clear. This is how you make the money on a mass scale. I think the savvy people make money there, but
Right.
there hasn't been that breakout yet. That savvy business person who says, no, this is it. This is how we're going.
I find it very interesting where we're talking about stuff like Apple, where you're buying a song for 99 cents, right? That, as a lawyer, what we're really doing, we're not buying that song. We're renting a license until Apple shuts it down. And,
Yes.
the world of NFTs is not a rental. And I find that very fascinating as a lawyer because, when, on average, how many people want to rent a new car full time? Like I guess it's a lease. There's people that do that,
Yeah.
but a lot of people like owning their vehicle. They like to feel like it's theirs. So I think there's both audiences, maybe people who want to own and people who want to rent. And NFTs are very specifically non-rental sort of situations. Once you buy it, it's yours. And once you dig down into NFTs, you're not actually buying the file, which I find very interesting. You're buying the serial number of the thing, which allows you access to it more or less.
Mm-hmm.
It has it in its metadata. It's stored maybe in a cloud server on Amazon Web Services or IPFS. But ultimately, what it's saying is you have the right to this thing. And I find the purchasing of content fascinating as an attorney because all these companies have made their living for the past, 10 years on renting content. That's the Netflix model. We rent content. You can watch it for 2 hours and then it's ours again. And now we're going back almost to like discs where you can buy something. And I think that's pretty cool. I like owning the stuff I
I think that,
want.
yeah, I'm sitting right now in front of a bookshelf with a ton of books on it, and I have friends who are like, "Why do you have books anymore? You can get everything digitally. Why like, if you can carry it around on your Kindle or you can carry it around on your, as PDFs, why do you want physical books. I'm glad you brought that up because I'm curious about NFTs if they're always going to be unalterable, because that's where I have the fear. I look at they're changing content. Episodes. This episode of this TV show
Oh,
is we
interesting.
find
Haven't even
today
thought of that. Yeah,
objectionable, so
yeah.
we're going to remove it. We're going to remove it from rotation. So there's certain like there's an episode of Community that has you just can't find it on streaming anymore because now it's considered objectionable, but it wasn't 5 years ago when it was broadcast.
Right.
You're looking at things like when they turned all the guns into walkie talkies because we can't have guns in a kids movie, or like just content that was produced in a different time period as a time capsule of that period. Someone finds objectionable and it either is altered or removed entirely. Hand shot first. I still have a videotape somewhere of hand shooting first, and now the modern version it's simultaneous because that was the solution, I guess. Because first they changed it to Greedo shot first, now it's simultaneous. But I have that original videotape of hand shooting first, and that's sort of the example of altering the content. Because my fears with all digital content is that when people change it, you change that art. You're changing art. You're looking.
Right.
It's like going back to the Sistine Chapel and saying, you know what, that piece right there,
He shouldn't really be
that doesn't
naked.
fit modern wall. Yeah, let's put clothes on that guy.
Let's put a robe on him.
And and it's like, well, on the one hand, you're like, okay, certain content, is objectionable by objective standards, but at the same time, it was created at that time, and understanding it in that context, that's up to it's up to the viewer, it's up to the person being going through the experience of that piece of art to determine what that means to them. Is there value to it or not, the way it was originally constructed? And I'm concerned moving forward. Like, if I buy an NFT, is that inalterable? Is that
I
permanent?
guess it's going to depend, and I guess this is more of a techie question. I do have that tech side. I did do a little bit of tech in undergrad on how the file is stored. One of which is, like we were talking about, Amazon Web Services. Yeah, that file is going to be alterable. There's also going to be the
Mm-hmm.
idea of maybe it's stored on IPFS, Interplanetary File System, as part of the blockchain, and if it's stored there, it should not be alterable. The other question is how it's actually, how it's related to in the actual NFT. If it's related to a URL, then it's going to be alterable. If it's related to a hash of the file, meaning a digitally encrypted set of numbers and letters that tell you what the file actually is full length, I would say that's probably going to be unalterable. So I guess the question then becomes of the people that are creating NFTs, if they're going to put in the metadata of the NFT, this is an alterable or an unalterable file. And yeah, that's interesting to me too. There's a bunch of episodes of shows, just like you're talking about, where they have taken out jokes or they have, changed the way somebody looks. They, at the time, it was just like their body, and now they're, body shaming them, 20 years later because
Mm-hmm.
it's inappropriate for that rating or something. And I find that very interesting what you're saying. It's something I hadn't ever considered, the idea of unalterable files for purposes of making sure that art stays art rather than it becoming this thing that, how many times before you change it is it no longer the same thing? That idea of, oh gosh, it was in the Marvel movie not too long ago. The idea of the ship that you take a piece of wood out, eventually it's not the same ship. I think that's a
Well,
fascinating piece of that argument.
Well, and I think it also it creates interesting opportunities moving forward, because you look at, like, there was an idea I was kicking around years ago that I probably should follow up on because someone's going to steal it. It's going to be out here in the public now, of doing a complete body and voice scan of an actor while they're in their 20s or 30s, and making them an NFT that they can then capitalize on. Their family could capitalize even after they're dead. Imagine a modern
Rights of
movie with
publicity.
John Wayne or Marilyn Monroe,
Right.
where you have a complete digital
On that.
capture.
I actually saw a project on not necessarily movie stars, but the idea of capturing your presence as a NFT for purposes of, the idea of avatars in games where it's actually you versus like
Mm,
an avatar that is not you. And they had a like a globe that you walked into that was probably, 30 feet tall, and it had 2,000 sensors to scan you. And this was in Dubai at Gitex. Gitex is like their equivalent of
Mm,
C3 or one of the tech shows we have here.
sure.
And yeah, that's absolutely right. You could use John Wayne in a new Western, because obviously if you're going to do a Western, you have to have John Wayne, and it would be even better if you had John Wayne and Val Kilmer. We all would agree to that, I'm sure.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, you could have a modern movie with Steve McQueen,
Hmm.
and think of this like, so you take an actor who is just an amazing actor, or like an instance with Star Wars. Carrie Fisher died before the third
Right.
sequel was filmed, and if they did digitize her to some effect in Rogue One, but imagine, so if I'm a mid-20s actor and I get scanned every 5 years, and you could have me at any age, and then after I'm gone, my family can be living off of that. They have control over my presence in a movie or a television show as an actor, and you could then be in another movie or another show 100 years from now. And to me, that just creates these fascinating opportunities
Fascinating
where
opportunities, but also from the legal sense, fascinating legal objections.
yes.
That's the Jimi Hendrix question. I think his family is
Mm,
still fighting over the rights to everything, and he died in what, like
sure.
1968 or 69. They're still fighting 45 years later, and you
Yeah,
know,
I
uh,
suppose that is one of the downsides.
right. So I guess you're gonna if we're gonna do that, we're gonna have to have much better wills.
Yeah, you'll have to have an ironclad "how does this pass down" kind of thing.
Right.
I don't know. In general, though, I feel like families should get 10 years. You get 10 years to capitalize on the person. That's it. And after that, you no longer, because I feel like there's the age old question of how long is copyright law, and then the question is, well, how long has it been since Mickey Mouse?
The Mickey
Because Disney's,
Mouseification of copyright.
yeah, yeah, because Disney pretty much owns that procedure and keeps pushing it down the line. And copyright used to be like way back in the day, what, like 25 years, and now it's like 90 or something.
It's life plus 90, and eventually it'll be
Yeah,
life plus 1,000, so Mickey Mouse can survive.
exactly. So there is that legal implication, but from a opportunities standpoint, you could have Han Solo, Princess Leia, and Luke Skywalker making movies for another 100 years. If each of them had their own digital rights with their personas that they could then hand off. It's interesting because Peter Cushing was obviously redone, and I don't know how that was handled legally with his family for Rogue One. So to me, that's a fascinating case.
Yeah, it's something that I should definitely be looking into for this podcast, because I think that what you bring up is very interesting, particularly for video games. Movies are one thing, right?
Hmm.
But like, I was having a conversation with somebody a while ago about the idea of superimposing like a action star's head onto every character in Battlefield, for example, like for example, Brad Pitt Deathmatch Saturdays. And
That's pretty cool.
the first rule about that is obviously you don't discuss it. And stuff like that's really cool in the video game sense, because we all want to feel attached in a way to the people that we find fascinating as far as stars or whatever. And if we could play as that person, that's really cool. Particularly if it's something interesting that captures the imagination, like Brad Pitt Deathmatch Saturday. Like, I think that should be a thing. And if you're working on that, sorry for screwing that up for you.
That's interesting. The thing is, yeah, it creates. I'm also just popped in my head was deep fakes, because deep fakes are becoming a problem as we get
Right.
better and better technology. There was the famous. I don't know if you're old enough to remember, but back in the '80s, famously Ronald Reagan was supposed to be on a radio program, and he said, They were doing a voice check, and for whatever reason, he said, "I'm pleased to announce that I've outlawed Russia forever. We begin bombing in 5 minutes." That went live. They were live at the
Nice.
time when he said it, and it freaked everybody out.
I don't remember
You
that,
imagine
but
that it happened, and it was like, oh no, this was supposed to be a voice check. He was being funny. This is not real. We are not bombing. We are not at war with Russia.
no, anybody that remembers
The
Reagan can remember him saying goofy things like that.
And the thing is nowadays with deep fakes, there was one I saw with Obama saying something that was obviously not true. I mean, at what point does that get weaponized and turn into like you turn on the nightly news and everybody's covering a deep fake of someone who, that panics the world? Because it
Right.
seems like in 5 minutes, valuations can just plummet. I mean, you already have Elon Musk doing that with his tweets,
Right.
and let alone with a deep fake trying to do the same thing.
He did that last night with a new crypto. I don't remember what it was called, but he changed his name to whatever the crypto name was, and the thing
Mm-hmm.
skyrocketed. And it's like, gosh, to have that much power over people's ideations of value is just crazy.
Well, it says something about us as human beings that Elon Musk screwing around on Twitter creates billions of dollars of movement in the market overnight.
Right.
What's going on that we as human beings are so susceptible to that?
Well, I am going to get to the point that we're going to go ahead and wrap this up, Tim. I really appreciate you coming on
Okay.
here, and I appreciate you just, chatting with me about kind of the things you see as interesting in the gaming space, and more specifically, how some of the things that we're talking about in cryptocurrency relate to that, and how that is coloring the games of tomorrow. And, I'll let you go ahead and say some sort of parting comment on how you think this is going to affect things as a whole, if you'd like. And again, thank you so much for coming on.
Oh, absolutely. It was a pleasure to be here. In general, I guess I would say that it's all about opportunities versus fear. A lot of people are driven by fear. They're afraid of new things. They panic before they start to realize, okay, the wheels start turning. How can I make an opportunity out of this? And as an entrepreneur, you always have to look at, okay, what are the opportunities? When everybody else is selling, do I look at buying? When everybody else is buying, do I look at selling?
Right.
If the world is collapsing, what are the opportunities here that stand out? Like, how can you make lemons of lemonade? And I think NFTs provide this interesting new world and dynamic that are going to affect video games, how we make video games, because video games, we didn't even get to how expensive they are. Even a cheap indie game these days is going to run you $1 million, and you have games in the movie budget range of 100 to 150 million being made, and those are risky. Those one bad game can kill you as a publisher, and that's why we're down this route of people asking for post release content and trying to sell you on loot boxes and that sort of thing, because they're trying to hedge that risk. They're trying to offset it. And I think NFTs give an interesting opportunity for the industry to better capitalize their games. I'm hoping they don't do it in a way that is bad capitalization of games,
Right.
because we've seen so much of that over the last 10 years. Because to me, as a gamer, as someone who wants to play games, I'm looking for new opportunities to make my games better, not necessarily just gouge you for that last penny. But NFTs create new opportunities and ways to game that I think are going to be really interesting in the future.
Well, again, Tim, thanks so much for coming on. And this podcast has been brought to you by oneupgaming.io and Unbox Games. One Up Gaming is bringing you the metaverse of tomorrow today, and Unbox Games is bringing you the really cool digitization of board games. Thanks again for being on, Tim. This has been a presentation of Crypto and Gaming Podcast. Thank you for listening. We are actively looking for more people to discuss crypto and gaming with, and how they relate to each other going forward. You can email me at hello@tabletop.works, and we'll be in touch. We'd love to hear what you have to say regarding crypto and gaming. Thank you again for listening to Crypto and Gaming, the podcast.